Agenda.
Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Ashley Gillen. With just a day until the budget, politicians and lobbyists from every special interest group you can imagine have arrived here in Canberra for the big event. But the usual pre-budget chatter has been sidetracked somewhat today with the fallout of the government's deal with Malaysia on asylum seekers. Today the Prime Minister has been copping criticism from the left and the right. Today, though, she launched this staunch defence of her plan.
We are intending to take a fairly tough approach to ensuring that we send a message to people smugglers right up the pipeline that they can no longer say to people that they can get them to Australia. If you get on a boat, then the risk you run is that you end up in Malaysia, and I'm not going to put any conditions or caveats on that. This is tough policy, and yes, we expect resistance, we expect protests, and no one should doubt our determination to get this done.
But the Greens have questioned the legality of the deal, and the opposition has slammed the move as desperate.
I'm saying there is no Malaysian solution. There is no Malaysian solution. Let's see the Malaysian solution, and then you can ask us that question. It's just another panicked, desperate thought bubble from a government which is literally drowning in problems of its own making.
Joining me this afternoon on our panel of politicians, the National Senator Fiona Nash and the Labor MP Kelvin Thomson. Good afternoon to you both. Let's start on this asylum seeker deal that was announced over the weekend. Kelvin, I almost don't know where to begin. There's so much criticism of this plan. First of all, Julia Gillard's basically acknowledged that the East Timor plan won't be going ahead after the government's been insisting for weeks that it is still on track, and everyone else has been saying that it isn't. But when it comes to this plan to send asylum seekers back to Malaysia, there are a lot of questions about the legality of this, and also whether it's just too harsh, that people going back there will be basically thrown out into the community to deal with themselves. Some people are saying it's worse than the conditions that were on Nauru under the Pacific Solution.
Ashley, I think that most Australians will be prepared to see whether this proposal works, rather than jumping to conclusions and saying it's too tough or it's not tough enough. I know there are some people, and there are some business lobby groups like the Institute of Public Affairs who think that anyone who wants to come to Australia should be allowed to come to Australia. But the vast majority of Australians don't have that view. Indeed, most Australians think that migration is too high. Most people want to see the boats stopped. Therefore, they will be prepared to give this proposal a go. Do
you think all of your colleagues will be prepared to give this a go? You've got a caucus meeting this afternoon. Do you expect there'll be some criticism from internally, some backbenchers perhaps who might not be happy with it?
I can't speak for all my colleagues in relation to this matter, but I think it's important to note that stopping the boats is the humanitarian perspective. People who say that situation in Malaysia is not good ought to then acknowledge the fact that the proposal involves an intake of 4,000 people over 4 years from Malaysia who've been through the proper process, who've been assessed by the United Nations High Commission for Refugees and the Australian Authority, people who've been seeking asylum for many years. I think their claims are more deserving than people who pay people smugglers to try to get here more quickly.
Yeah, there has been a lot of criticism that this is too tough. Not too many, though, saying that it isn't tough enough. This will act as a deterrent, won't it?
The fact that you've got what is, in essence, a 1 for 5 swap is extraordinary in itself to start with. The fact that 800 will go from here across, we'll take 800 back from Malaysia. There's a significant price tag with this as well. It's around $54,000, I think, for every person that comes from Malaysia, around $90,000 for those that are intercepted and sent across to Malaysia. It really is another example from this government of policy on the run. It's not so much a plan as a bit of a cobbled together on the run idea that the Prime Minister seems to have come up with. It's not surprising that there's been a lot of negative commentary about it, because It simply is another cobbled-together plan from the government. What the Prime Minister should be doing is picking up the phone to the President of Nauru and solving the problem. Instead, we seem to have every few months another thought bubble idea come out from the Prime Minister on how to deal with a very, very difficult problem.
But the coalition has been arguing for some time that the government should be focusing on people who are accepted through the proper queues. They go through the proper processes. That's what the government's doing with this swap.
Well, to a degree, yes, but the fact that the Malaysian government seems to have seen our Prime Minister coming and has negotiated this deal which really benefits Malaysia far more than it does us. And it comes back to the basic principle. If the government was prepared to swallow their pride, the Prime Minister swallowed her pride, picked up the phone to Nauru, sorted that, went to temporary protection visas, turned back boats where we can. It's about stopping the problem. The numbers speak for themselves. We've got something like 7,000 in detention now compared to a handful when the coalition left government, and that is directly related to what the government is doing and the policies they've got in place.
Kelvin, what is the argument now against Nauru, considering that Malaysia also is not a signatory to the UN Refugee Convention?
Well, the government has negotiated with the Malaysian government the involvement of the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, and that the Malaysian government will not repatriate anyone who is at risk of torture or persecution if they are returned to their home country. So we are satisfied with the protections that we have in relation to that. And it's also important to note that Nauru is not a place which has refugees. This is Malaysia is a place where there are quite a few refugees, many people of Burmese background who have languished for years. Therefore, we are in the position to do something which has the capacity to break the people smugglers' business model, and that is the intention. And if we are able to do that, then we will be in a better position to stop the boats. We will be in a better position to produce humanitarian outcomes where the people who are at the front of the queue get better treatment and people who pay people smugglers go to the back of the queue, as they should.
But at Nauru, people, asylum seekers, refugees, at least they got shelter, food, access to medical treatment. None of that's going to be available in Malaysia, is it?
I believe it will be. I believe that the Australian government has negotiated appropriate protections, appropriate monitoring, the involvement of the United Nations High Commission for Refugees. So I believe that will be the case. But I mean, you can't say that things are crook in Malaysia without acknowledging the fact that we are prepared to take over the next 4 years 4,000 people who have been in that situation. That is an humanitarian act.
Is the coalition opposed to bringing in more people on refugee visas? Apparently Tony Abbott in December said that he would actually look at a modest expansion of our refugee intake. He says that he'd be willing to move it up to 15,000, so which is an extra 1,500 people or so. It's sort of the same numbers the government's looking at now.
Well, the capacity to increase always has to be looked at, but it's the method through which you increase those numbers that's important. Now, what we've got in front of us at the moment with this deal with Malaysia, it's a one-off agreement. This is only over a number of years. Even the Malaysian representative has said, well, we'll see what happens after that time. So it's not going to send any strong and clear message to people smugglers, because they'll know it's only a temporary quick fix that the Prime Minister's cobbled together to try and put some sort of semblance of that the government's doing something about this.
Well, there are some more details to come. We saw the Prime Minister quizzed extensively about certain situations like if a pregnant woman arrives on a boat, for example, will she go straight back to Malaysia? And it seems like the government still does have quite a few details to nut out on this as this deal is finalised. We are going to take a quick break. Coming up next, we'll be looking at the budget speculation whirling around here at Parliament House. We'll bring you the latest on that after this break.